Hello folks, and welcome to the channel, or welcome back. And in this video we're going to look at the total cost of ownership of a classic car. So once you decided to get a classic or an old-timer, then it's time to select the model and type you want to get. And that's the first decision maker in the total cost of ownership. What is the initial procurement price? How much are you willing to pay for it? And that depends a lot of the type of car you want to go for. There are brands that have been produced in mass production and are available on the market even still today in abundance. There are other vehicles that were produced in very small amounts, and that's going to be more hard to get, and they will be far more expensive. But even within the mass production cars, you will find certain types of models that were only produced for a short time. For instance, the classic Mini Cooper, and that's going to cost you a bit of money. So you need to decide, first of all, how extreme you want to go in the type of car. For me, at the end of the day, it's all about the fun, rebuilding it and driving it. So I'm not really interested in showing off with it. That's not me. But it's up to you to decide. Now, once you've decided what kind of car you want to get, now it's time to decide what is the state you want to have it. Now maybe you want to start driving it from day one, then you should get a proper Type B car, as we call it. But you might as well be willing to work on it for a year or 2 years before you get it on the road, and then you can go for a Type A, as we call it, which is basically an old clunker with lots of mechanical and body work. And be prepared for lots of body work and mechanical work, the brakes, the suspension, the engine, but also the interior, the electricity. There's always a lot of things to be done, and once you start on a job, you never know where you're going to finish, and I'm sure that most of you have that experience. So, and you can also decide to go for a showroom type. Now, of course, right, if you go for a showroom model, then, or a winning price model, then you're going to pay a lot of money, because you will pay the money for the car and all the work that's been done to it and the profit of the people that did it. So prices are extremely high, and I think prices are way too high nowadays anyhow. But that's a choice you need to make, because all this relates back to your skill set. Do you have the skill set to do mechanical work, to work on the engine, to work on the gearbox, on the differentials, on the drive shafts, and so on? And maybe you're just much better in body work. Maybe you have your own paint booth, maybe you don't. So you need to look at all that. What is my skill set? Can I actually do it? And to be very honest, you can learn all this. That is not very hard. But still, it's not only the skill set, it's also the tools. You've got to have sufficient tools in your workshop. And if you have to go out and start buying all the tools you're going to need for the job to get a old clunker back onto the road, well, then you might as well decide not to do it. You might as well buy a car which has already been restored. The things I would watch out for is cars that have been restored with heavy modifications. I'd rather stay clear of those, because you never know what they've done to it, and in many cases these modifications are really badly done. It didn't improve the car at all. So that's something I like to stay away from. But of course, that's my own personal preference, and for you that could be different. Well, now that we know the type of the car, we also know the state of the car, and we know our skill sets, now we already can make a pretty good judgment of what kind of a car we would like to get. But keep in mind that there is a fourth factor, and that is the availability of spare parts, and that can become a real big issue. If you buy a mass production car, like the MGs, like the Triumphs, like the classic Minis, and so many other cars, and yes, I'm apologizing because I'm into British sports cars or classic cars, then you will find a lot of spare parts. You will find them for very cheap prices and in abundance. And basically every nut and bolt you can still get today. That's certainly the case for the classic Mini and the MGB GTs, the MGs, the Triumphs, the TR6s, the TR5s. But you can get all this. It's a bit different for a TVR 3000M, for instance. You find parts, not all of them, and if your rear window is broken, I don't think you have a chance to get a new one. You probably have to find a donor car for it. make sure that you checked out the availability of spare parts before you engage on a project. I have a couple of projects running where there's basically no spare parts, and you probably remember old Rusty, but I'm not going to talk about that one because these are kind of like pre-war cars, and getting spare parts is a pain in the butt, and often you have to start repairing it yourself. If you get a classic car with a famous brand, a red color, maybe, what's it called? The little horse, the Ferrari, expect to pay a lot for spare parts. Although they may not be that special, but that's just the price you pay for the brand name. So if you add those four things together, you get a fairly good indication of the cost to buy the car, to repair it, and to get it onto the road. Now, I haven't talked about getting it on the road, because that depends a lot where you live. If you live in Europe, or at least where I live, in Belgium, then there are a couple of issues. You have to get to the technical inspection, the MOT, and it becomes more and more stringent. So if you get a classic car, which is heavily modified or modified, there is no way, or almost no way, to get it through the MOT. Although it may have improved a lot, and I'm just going to give you one simple example. I changed once the brake hoses from normal brake hoses to braided stainless steel brake hoses, and the car didn't pass the MOT just because that was not standard on the car. It was far better, but it doesn't matter, they don't accept it. And that's especially the case if you go into import cars, then you may have a real big issue with that. So think about that as well. Try to buy an old-timer or a classic car that is already registered in the country where you live, that is already on the license plate. It will make your life so much easier. If it isn't, then you really need to do a deep check on what the legislation is where you live. How can you get it on the road? Can you get it on the road? Is all the paperwork correct? The title, the chassis number, and is the chassis number still visible? And was this car ever allowed in your country? Because sometimes that's another reason to be declined in the MOT. Once you've got all that sorted, then you're ending up in the situation whereby now you can register the car. And where I live, again, it's not that expensive. I can register the car as an old-timer. Typically, it's been seen on the O marking on the license plate. And that runs you about 75 euros a year on road tax. No matter how large the engine is and how much power you have, it doesn't really matter. And the insurance, of course, you need to have, which is around 175 euros for an old-timer again. Now, that will depend from country to country. So now that we know the different factors that will influence the total cost of ownership, I'm going to give you an example of 4 different British sports cars, well, at least 3 sports cars and a classic Mini. On how much I paid for them, all the work that I had to do on it, what state I got them, and what my end state was, because a lot of it depends on the end state in terms of cost. If you only want to repair the car to have a good, comfortable riding car that you can rely on, but you don't really worry about some scratches because it's not a showroom car, it's not a concours car, then it's going to cost less than, of course, if you go in for a concours car. That's quite obvious. So we're going to look at a classic Mini. We're also going to look at a MGB GT, a TVR 3000M, and a DAX Rush, which is something like a Lotus Super 7. And they all have their different issues. They all had their different costs that were involved during the actual procurement and the restoration of the cars. So let us start looking first of all at the Mini. So this classic Mini is the 1000 version. You also have the 1275s and the Coopers. They are a bit more expensive, but this Mini is from 1986. So I was able to buy this vehicle for a fairly cheap price. It ran about 4,000 euros, and there was a bit of work towards it. It was leaking oil, the drive shafts were gone, the brakes were no good in the front, the subframes were no good. There was a welding job to be done on the floor pans and on the sills. There were all kind of issues, and also the engine had to be revised and reworked, so we did actually made it into a stage 2 engine, We got new valve covers, we got a new exhaust. We also installed an AFR gauge on it and a wideband oxygen sensor. We got a new exhaust system on it, and we actually modified the carburetor to a HIF 44. So a lot of work was done on this Mini to get it to the condition it is in right now. And it was not just all mechanical work. We also have some electrical work to be done, and we had to do some body work as well, including spraying. And then, of course, I decided to make it look like an old Britax racing Mini. That's why you see all the stickers. So I've tried to make it kind of a replica. The interior was as bad as the outside once I got it. In fact, there were no carpets inside. The seats were ugly white. Well, actually kind of yellowish. They probably have been a little bit of beige before, but now they turned into ugly yellowish seats. They were still very comfortable, but they looked like hell in this car. I mean, I wanted to use another word, but I'm not going to use that word. So I decided to change the seats out to classic Cobra seats. And at the same time, I took the rear seat out and replaced it with an aluminum panel. And then I also placed a roll bar in the back. Not in the front, because that's not allowed. So we took care of the wheels. And I think this Mini right now looks pretty nice and neat. It drives very smooth, and the sound of this Mini is just great. You can see all the video clips on this Mini on my channel, what we have done to it. Unfortunately, I don't have the spray job on it. I don't have the sticker job on it, but I have a lot of the mechanical work on it. If I look at the total cost of that Mini, then I bought it for 4,000 euros. I spent another 2,000 on the engine, a new radiator, new water pump, then the stage 2 cylinder head, the exhaust, the HIF 44 carburetor, which was actually a second-hand carburetor that I rebuilt. That altogether easily ran up to about 2,500 euros on just for that. Then I had to do the suspension. I had to change the subframes, take them from underneath and repaint them. As you can see now, they are kind of reddish painted. That was another 500 euros. And then I had the whole drive shaft problem, which was another 1,000 euros altogether, together with the ball joints and all the seals that I had to replace. And once all that was done, I had kind of a Mini which was ready. So that was already near to an additional 4,000 euros altogether. And then I added the seats and the carpets and the roll bar, and that was another 1,500 euros. So at the end of the day, I ended up with about 10,000 euros for this classic Mini. Now you can ask yourself the question, is this type of a classic Mini worth the money? Well, that's all entirely up to you. For me, it is. I had so much fun rebuilding it, and I still enjoy driving it. It's probably the most fun car I have. It's so much fun in the city. It's swift and fast. Not on the highway. Don't expect miracles from this car on the highway. You know, the highway is not its place to be, but on small country roads and in the city, it's great. And I get a lot of thumbs up from people that see me driving it, which I don't get with the other cars. Now the MGB GT, that's a bit of a different story. The MGs were very popular cars, and a lot of them have been built. And a lot of collectors like the cabriolet, so the open top, the convertible. I don't. I like the MGB GT, and often called the poor man's E-Type Jaguar. They are not that expensive to get, but they suffer from the same old problem of English sports cars, rust. So you will have to change a lot of parts, and this car as well, we changed a lot of parts. The fenders were bad. But as you can see, I did not put the normal fenders back up. I went for a Sebring kit. So now I have a valance in the front, I have wider wings on the side, and it gives the car a more of a mean look. And I think I achieved it with this MGB GT. We've done a lot of work and modifications on the suspension. I put a Costella suspension up. We changed the front discs as well, and a special exhaust adaptation. But most of all, we did change the engine out. The engine was initially a 1.8 liter, and I changed it out towards a 3.9 liter V8 from Rover. It's a big engine, so you need to do some adaptations, and you need to cut out some inner fenders to run the exhaust pipes through. But it's a great engine for a small car like this. So this car goes like a rocket, and these are very, very solid engines. Now, getting a Rover V8 engine to install it into an MGB GT body, so it's a conversion in this case, it takes a lot of time and effort, and the Rover engine did run me 2,000 euros because it was in a very good state. Now, it came as a injection, so I took the injection part off, and I changed it with a Edelbrock intake manifold and an Edelbrock carburetor, CMF 500. So a lot of changes were really done on this car, body-wise, but also the new powertrain went in. The gearbox was replaced with a 5-speed gearbox, and that makes a big difference. I could have kept the 4-speed gearbox, so the acceleration would be faster, but yeah, I decided at the end to go for a 5-speed gearbox. The suspension was lowered all around. We got new shocks installed on it. We got these light wheels on it, and I think this is looking pretty good. We actually have track wideners on it, which is kind of illegal, so you need to take those off on the MOT. But at the interior, I haven't done very much. I still have a complete carpet set laying around to install it. I haven't gotten to it yet. We just had to change a few of the dials. The RPM meter had to be changed because, of course, it was for a 4-cylinder. Now it's an 8-cylinder, so I had to put a new one in. But besides that, there wasn't a lot changed in the interior beside a battery brake switch and the electrical power steering. I think that might be interesting because I can adjust this on a little knob on the dashboard, and then I can work on the power steering with the support of an electrical motor that's working into the steering column. Very handy, very comfortable because the engine is fairly big that sits in it, and it weighs a bit heavier on the front of the car. Although I think the total weight of the V8 is not much more than the total weight of a 1.8 liter original engine on the MGB GT. With all these changes on the MGB GT, the price actually ended up pretty near to about 18,000 euros. So that was the MGB GT. In terms of getting it on the road, the MOT passed very smoothly because there were no major modifications done, although the body-wise was changed. I think this is going to be a problem with the new European legislation that's coming up for MOT. We may not be able to do this anymore, but the cars that have been inspected, they can continue to be used. So the third car we're going to look at is the TVR 3000M, and this is a 1976 TVR. Now those were not built in mass production. They are polyester bodies with a tubular chassis, and if you're looking around for them, you will find out that they are quite expensive. A vehicle that has some work on it can run you easily up to about 16,000 euros, and then you already are very lucky, and it's not going to be a left-hand drive TVR. And that's one of the issues you have with TVRs. Most of them are right-hand drive. Now, as you have noticed, most of my cars are also right-hand drive in Europe, and I don't mind because I think it's fun. Now, I don't drive it daily, so that's actually another consideration if you're going to buy a classic car. If you want to knock down the price a bit, you could buy a right-hand drive classic car in a left-hand drive country or the other way around, and that might save you a bit of money. Nevertheless, the TVR, well, it's a very hard car to get spare parts for. Triumphs and MGs and Minis, they are easy to get parts. There's plenty of parts on the market. The TVR is a lot more difficult, and if you do find the parts, they are quite expensive. Now on this TVR, although it looked pretty good when we bought it, and I bought it for 16,000 euros, and it did pass MOT when it was sold. However, it was leaking oil all over the place. I had to change all the gaskets, the seals on the engine. We had to change the valve covers. We changed, of course, all the ignition leads. We changed all the hoses for the cooling. We changed the water pump, the fuel pump. We also changed the swirl pot, and the radiator is new. So we corrected a lot of the electrical problems that this car had, and we cleaned up the interior. We replaced the seats, and we already kind of cleaned up the chassis to a large extent, because the chassis on these vehicles is based off a tubular chassis, and they get pretty rusty over time. So if you buy one of these, you gotta check the chassis, the tubular chassis, for corrosion, because they are well known to have a big issue there. I also changed the hinges on the doors. Now, just to give you an idea on how much that can be, the hinges were running around 64 euros a piece. Now, that's expensive for a single hinge. So that's 128 euros for a single door, so that's a lot of money. So I bought two just to see how it goes, and then I did rebuild the other two that I took off into a brand new condition, basically. I also had to repaint the car. In certain areas, the guy before me had stickers on them, black, huge stickers. So I had to take those off. And by doing so, although I heated them up, I peeled off some of the paint that was on the car. The paint wasn't really painted very well, because otherwise it wouldn't have come off. But it did come off, so I had to repaint some parts of this car, and I still have a few little things to be done. So like I said, I bought it for 16,000 euros, and I have spent another 1,200 euros just on the engine alone, the cables, the hoses, the water pump, the fuel pump, the distributor, and so on. I also had to change the exhaust to a large extent, especially the front pipes, the heaters as we call them. Those had to be replaced, so that was another cost of about 800 euros. Luckily, the complete stainless steel exhaust was still in a good condition, so I was able to recover that. But if not, that would have been up for another 1,000 euros. The radiator is another interesting part. You can go and get an aluminum radiator, or you can get your original one rebuilt with a high-efficiency core. Now, that's what I did. I got a high-efficiency core on this TVR, and the cooling is just now perfect. I did have to get a new swirl pot, so that was another 250 euros. So all by all, I have spent on this TVR another 4,000 euros to get it from the state it was in, with all its shortcomings, to where it is right now. And now it's kind of a pretty nice and cozy sports car that I can rely on. It fits and drives very nice. Well, I should say it sits and drives very nice. And by the way, the seats that I put in are second-hand seats. I got those from a Mazda Miata or an MX-5. They fit perfectly in it, but you have to do some adaptations to it. And for the rest, is this TVR as good as ready to hit the road? And yeah, it did cost me in total about 20,000 euros. So as you can see, no matter what kind of car you get, you always have a high cost, or a considerable high cost, to get it to a certain condition or state you want to have it in. And the last car we're going to look at is a Dax Rush. Now, this is a kit car built on the Lotus chassis. I got this car for near to 10,000 euros, and the reason for that is it's very rare. There are not that many around, certainly not the one with the chassis, which is a 1967 chassis, although the Dax Rush itself is not from that age, but they used these chassis, so the paperwork talks about the 1967 Lotus chassis. DCOE Weber carburetors, and I had to recondition those completely because they were worn out. I also had to change all the seals on the engine. We had to readjust the valves, so we had to do a little bit of testing on the valves themselves because there was one cylinder that was not really having the right compression. The clutch was stuck, so I had to take the engine out of the car, put a new clutch in, a new pressure plate, a new bearing. We also had to change all the brakes calipers. We had to recondition all the brake calipers. We had to work on the suspension and the bushes. And then we put an electronic ignition in it. So there was a lot of work to be done, and then the overall cleanup, and then the complete spray job on this car. That was another major effort to get it all cleaned up and ready in the state it is in right now. So now I have a decent Dax Rush to drive around with, but of course you're not going to drive around with this on a Sunday afternoon. And this is also something which is important to note, that much depends on for what purpose you're going to use the classic car. If it's just to drive around on a sunny afternoon, then the Dax Rush is a nice car because it's fast and it's loud, but it's not very comfortable. Now, the drawback on buying a Dax Rush or something like this, which is a kit car or a car that was not produced in large amounts, is that it may be very hard to find the parts. Dax Rush is not a brand on itself, so they were using a lot of parts from other type of cars, from other brands, and you can't always track them back what it was, and that often is a bit of a problem. So you have to start searching. For sure, if the ball joints are gone on this car, I really will have to fabricate something to fit new ones, maybe from a Triumph or maybe from an MG. I don't know. I would have to look around and get the right dimensions. And that's the problem with these extreme cars. So you can now see the difference. So you've seen the 4 different cars. We went from a very easy to get classic Mini with lots of spare parts on the market, but you also have seen that I spent another 4,000 to 5,000 euros on it to get it to the state it's in. But the total cost of ownership is around 10,000 euros. Then we looked on the MGB GT, and there you have an abundance of spare parts on the market as well. But we went a little bit for a different kind of look. We went for the Sebring look and we upgraded the engine. So that drove the price up, the total cost of ownership, nearly to 20,000 euros. And then we had the TVR, and this was a good buy because 16,000 euros for a car like this, and the state it was in, is a good price here in Belgium. One of the reasons is, of course, it's a right-hand drive car, and they are not that popular. I did spend a lot of work on this car as well, as you have seen, and that brings it up as well to about 20,000 euros of total cost of ownership. So again, it's a lot of money, and parts were fairly hard to get. You can find them. There's a lot of good forums. You can talk to people. On Facebook, there's a nice forum. So try to find clubs or groups of people that have done this kind of work. They can really help you. And then finally, we looked at the extreme case, which is a Dax Rush, which is something I would never do again. It's too difficult to identify all the parts and to get the parts and to get it on the road, because that was another long story, to get the Dax Rush onto the road in Belgium through the MOT, because it has no wipers, it has no spray on the windscreen, and therefore it cannot pass MOT. So the only thing I could do is take the windscreen off and go without the windscreen, and it passed MOT. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it's not what I normally produce. This was a bit different, but I think it's worthwhile sometimes to talk about vehicles and how much they cost you to run, to buy, and to maintain them. So good luck with your oldtimer, and see you in my next video.